Long before the wheat fields whispered in the wind, long before fences stitched the horizon into careful lines, before the lonely roads and grain silos and the slow hum of tractors at dusk, there was water, a vast inland sea breathing beneath a younger sun. Imagine standing now in the quiet heart of the prairie. The sky is wide, almost impossibly wide, painted in soft bands of violet and fading gold. Grass bends in slow waves around you. There is no shoreline in sight, no gulls, no salt on the air, and yet, beneath your feet lies the memory of waves. It is said that the land remembers everything, that even when oceans withdraw, even when continents rearrange themselves in silence, something of the tide remains, folded into stone, pressed into dust, waiting beneath the surface like a dream not fully forgotten. This was the Western Interior Seaway, a name given much later, long after the waters had gone. But once, it was not a name. It was a living body of water, stretching from what we now call the Gulf of Mexico to the distant Arctic. It divided a continent in two. East and west were strangers, separated by warm, shallow currents that shimmered beneath a Cretaceous sky. Stand here long enough, and the prairie begins to blur. The wind grows heavy. The air thickens with salt and warmth. The grass dissolves into reeds and tidal flats, and slowly, almost gently, the land sinks beneath green light. You are no longer standing in Kansas or Alberta or Montana. You are suspended above a sea that glows beneath the sun like polished jade. Ammonites drift below, their shells coiled in sacred spirals, each chamber a quiet record of growth. They move without urgency, carried by currents that have no memory of fences or fields. Schools of fish flash silver beneath the surface. Farther down, in deeper shadow, ancient reptiles glide like thoughts half-formed. Mosasaur, plesiosaur, names we give them now, but in that time they were simply presence. Long, fluid bodies slicing through warm water, eyes attuned to movement and shimmer. Predators and pilgrims of the inland deep. Above them, the surface of the sea ripples under a wide, unbroken sky. The land itself was not solid certainty then. It was softer, submerged, patient, becoming. It is said that the earth moves slowly enough that we forget it is moving at all, that mountains rise and oceans flood, not in thunder, but in breath. The Western Interior Seaway did not appear in a single moment of drama. It arrived as water always does, quietly filling the spaces offered to it. Tectonic plates shifted far away, pressing and bending the crust of the world. The center of the continent dipped, and into that gentle basin the sea flowed, not as conqueror, but as guest. For millions of years it remained. Chalk cliffs began to form from the quiet snowfall of shells. Tiny plankton drifted through sunlit waters, lived their brief luminous lives, and sank to the bottom in soft white layers. Layer upon layer, century upon century, a snowfall without winter. What we now see as limestone and chalk, pale bluffs rising from prairie, were once the sea floor. Each stone a congregation of forgotten lives, each cliff a cathedral built from silence. Whispers tell us that time beneath water feels different, slower, more diffuse. In the shallow reaches of the seaway, reefs blossomed like underwater gardens. Crabs moved across sandy beds. Sea turtles surfaced for air beneath a sky that knew no boundaries. And on distant shores, on islands and narrow ridges that pierced the surface, dinosaurs walked. They stood at the edge of the water, unaware that the land beneath their feet was temporary, that the horizon before them was not a permanent line, but a tide. It is easy to imagine extinction as sudden, as flame, as impact and ash. But the disappearance of this inland sea was something else. It withdrew, breath by breath. As the plates of the earth shifted again, the basin lifted, the water shallowed, shorelines crept inward, then farther inward still. Marsh became meadow, seabed became plain. There was no final wave crashing in farewell, no great mourning, Just a long, gradual retreat. What does it mean for a sea to vanish? Did it feel its own departure? Did it sense the loss of its tides against stone? Or was it simply transformation, as natural as evaporation beneath sun? Perhaps the sea did not mourn. Perhaps it merely changed its form, folding itself into rock and memory. For even as the waters withdrew, they left behind messages, fossils pressed into stone like sealed letters, the delicate bones of fish, articulated and still, the imprint of fins, the curve of a vanished jaw, spirals of ammonite shells, perfectly preserved, as if waiting for someone to lift them gently from the dust and wonder. In forgotten corners of the earth, farmers plough fields and unearth shells that once rested beneath waves. Children pick up smooth white stones, unaware they are holding the floor of an ancient ocean. Beneath the silence of the prairie, the sea remains, its salt folded into limestone, its tides suspended in time. And there is contradiction here, soft, almost sacred. What appears dry and endless was once submerged and shimmering. What feels permanent was once fluid and shifting. The prairie sky at dusk, vast and unbroken, once reflected on green water. The wind that moves through tall grass, now once rippled across open sea. Some believe that landscapes carry memory in ways we cannot measure, that the body recognizes ancient patterns even when the mind forgets. Perhaps that is why standing in wide, open places can feel strangely oceanic, why the sweep of prairie sometimes feels like a tide. The sea split the continent in two, and then, without spectacle, allowed it to become one again. East and west reunited over former depths. Creatures evolved and vanished. Rivers traced the faint scars left behind by retreating waters. Sediment once carried by ocean currents now nourishes crops and wildflowers. The inland sea did not disappear entirely. It transformed. It became dust. It became stone. It became the quiet minerals in soil. It became the pale bluffs that glow under moonlight. And perhaps it became something else as well, an echo in the imagination, a reminder that even vastness is temporary. That division can become unity. That absence is not the same as emptiness. Now return slowly to the prairie at dusk. The sun has slipped below the horizon. The sky deepens into indigo. Grass moves in long, patient waves around you. There is no salt in the air, no visible tide, but if you listen closely, if you allow the wind to soften and your breath to slow, you may sense something beneath your feet, a resonance, a layered hush. It is said that some voices only echo when we are ready to listen. Beneath the soil, beneath roots and rock and fossil, the inland sea still whispers, not in sound, but in presence, in the way chalk crumbles between fingers, in the spiral of a shell unearthed from a field, in the curve of a bluff against a star-marked sky. The tides are no longer visible, but they are suspended in time, held within stone, like a memory folded carefully away. Perhaps the sea was never meant to remain. Perhaps it was meant to pass through, to carve, to nourish, to divide and reunite, and then to dissolve into something quieter. Now the prairie rests where waves once moved. The sky arches overhead, unchanged in its celestial drift. And somewhere deep below, in layers of dust and chalk and ancient shell, the inland sea breathes still, not with water, but with memory. You stand above it, unaware and yet connected. The grass bends like surf. The wind moves like a distant tide. And the sea beneath the prairie sky waits, not to return, but to be remembered. As night settles and stars appear one by one, you realize that the world is always layered. What is visible rests upon what was rests upon what will be. The inland sea is gone, and yet it is here, marked by the moon, buried in dust, echoing softly beneath the endless prairie sky. At twilight, the cliffs glow pale beneath a lavender sky. You walk slowly along a dry escarpment where wind brushes the stone in long, patient sighs. The rock beneath your hand feels cool, chalky, almost fragile. It flakes at the slightest pressure, dust drifting downward like the memory of snowfall. It is said that this stone is not merely stone, it is the bed of a vanished shore. Once, waves folded themselves against this very edge. Once, salt and foam gathered where your shadow now falls. Once, colossal reptiles surfaced here, their dark eyes reflecting an ancient sun that no longer warms these plains. Stand very still, and the prairie begins to loosen its grip on reality. The wind thickens. The air grows heavy with warmth. The pale cliffs soften, as if dissolving back into the element that shaped them. And slowly, without urgency, you are drawn backward into a time when this dry height was not land at all, but shoreline. We enter the sea as it was, warm, luminous, oceanic. The water glows green beneath a young sky, sunlight filtering down in trembling columns. It is shallow here, close to the coast, where sand meets reef and the breath of the continent exhales into the tide. Mosasaur drift below like thoughts half-formed, long bodies, serpentine and fluid, moving with quiet dominion through curtains of plankton. They do not thrash, they do not roar, they simply glide, ancient, immense, aware. Plesiosaurs follow in deeper water, their long necks arcing gently as they rise toward the surface to breathe. Their presence feels less like danger and more like inevitability, a rhythm of the sea itself. Above them, seabirds wheel in endless arcs, white against the vast sky. Their cries echo over water that stretches toward horizons untouched by fences or roads. The shoreline is a threshold here, a sacred boundary between land and depth, between breath and the submerged silence below. On distant islands and marshy outcroppings, dinosaurs move through reeds, their feet pressing into soft sediment that will one day harden into stone. They drink from the edge of the sea without knowing that the sea is temporary. It is said that the creatures of that time lived within a world both stable and shifting. The shoreline seemed eternal, and yet beneath the silence, tectonic forces moved with patience beyond comprehension. The continents were not fixed, they were breathing, and this sea, the Western Interior Seaway, was born of that breath. It divided the continent in two, creating eastern and western lands that knew each other only through the shimmer of distant water. For millions of years, life gathered along this edge. Coral colonies built delicate cities beneath the waves. Ammonites spiraled through green light, their shells etched with sacred geometry. Fish darted in silver flashes, weaving through submerged forests of seagrass. And always the shoreline endured. Waves folded themselves again and again against these cliffs, wearing them smooth. Foam dissolved into sand. The sun rose and fell over an ocean that seemed without end. Yet the mystery lies not only in what lived here, it lies in why it ended. Whispers tell us that there was no thunderous farewell, no final tempest tearing the sea from its bed. Instead, the ocean receded the way breath leaves the body, gradually, imperceptibly, until absence replaces presence. Continents shifted, the basin lifted, the waters shallowed. The shoreline crept inward, step by invisible step. Marsh became meadow, reef became rock. Creatures adapted, migrated, or vanished into the long silence of extinction. What had been a sacred corridor of life became dry stone beneath open sky. How does something so vast dissolve without visible sorrow? Did the sea mourn its own retreat? Did the mosasaur feel the water thinning around its body? Or did the transformation pass so slowly that even the creatures within it barely noticed? Beneath the silence of geological time, change is gentle. It is said that the earth reshapes itself not with anger, but with patience. The sea did not die. It withdrew. It folded itself into limestone and chalk. It left behind fossils like sealed letters pressed into cliff faces, bones held in stillness, spirals locked in dust, teeth curved in permanent quiet. Now, in forgotten corners of the earth, these relics surface. You run your hand across the pale cliff once more. Embedded within it are fragments of a world submerged in memory, a rib, delicate and curved, the imprint of scales, the faint outline of a shell. They wait, as if expecting someone to remember. The prairie wind carries no scent of salt. There are no gulls now, only the low hum of insects and the soft rustle of grass. But beneath your feet, beneath layers of dust and soil, the shoreline remains, buried, veiled, celestial in its quiet endurance. There is contradiction here, soft and sacred. What feels solid was once fluid. What feels eternal was once in motion. The land you stand upon was ocean floor. The cliffs that rise above you were once caressed by waves. It is easy to think of history as a procession of events, loud, decisive, dramatic. But this story is not that. This story is a whisper. A slow exchange between water and stone, a shoreline that vanished without spectacle, leaving behind only echo and spiral. Imagine now a child walking these plains generations from now. The sun is high. The wind moves lazily through wheat. The child stoops to pick up something pale and curved from the dust, a fossil shell, smooth and cool in the palm. They turn it over, tracing its spiral with quiet curiosity. They do not see the ocean. They do not hear the seabirds. They do not feel the warm, luminous water that once surrounded this fragile form. And yet, they are holding the ocean floor. They are touching a shoreline that no longer exists. Perhaps it was never meant to be found. Perhaps the sea left these fragments not as monuments, but as murmurs. Subtle reminders that what is visible rests upon what was. As twilight deepens, the cliffs glow faintly under a star-marked sky. The lavender fades into indigo. One by one, stars appear, unchanged in their distant watch. Long ago, those same stars reflected in the surface of this inland sea. Their light trembled across waves that lapped against these very rocks. Now they shine over prairie grass. The shoreline remains, not in water, not in foam, but in silence. Beneath the silence, something persists, the echo of tides suspended in stone, the memory of reptiles gliding through green light, the faint salt of an oceanic breath folded into chalk. You stand at the edge of what once was, listening. The wind moves across the escarpment like a distant surf. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen. And perhaps the shoreline of silent reptiles was never meant to vanish completely. Perhaps it simply changed its language, from wave to stone, from roar to whisper, from ocean to dust. And in that transformation, it left behind something gentler than memory, a feeling that even the vastest waters can dissolve into sky and soil, that even the most colossal creatures can rest in quiet fossil sleep, that what disappears does not always leave. It lingers, marked by the moon, buried in dust, echoing softly beneath the pale cliffs at twilight. The cliffs appear first, as a pale shimmer on the horizon. It is night. The fields of wheat lie hushed beneath a silver sky. The moon hangs low, veiled in a thin mist, and its light pours gently over the land as though blessing it. In that glow, the cliffs rise, white and luminous, like something carved from cloud and bone. You approach them slowly. They do not tower in menace. They do not demand attention. They simply stand, quiet and patient, their surfaces soft and powdery beneath the touch. It is said that these cliffs are not merely stone, they are the accumulated breath of an ocean. Long before wheat roots gripped this soil, long before wind bent golden stalks in soft repetition, there was water here. Warm, shallow, oceanic water stretching far beyond sight. And within that water drifted countless lives too small to see with the naked eye. Plankton, delicate, translucent beings suspended in sunlit currents. They lived brief, luminous existences, gathering light and dissolving it into their fragile forms. When they died, their tiny skeletons, made of calcium and memory, sank slowly through the green depths, one by one, grain by grain, layer by layer. The sea did not rush this process. It unfolded with the rhythm of prayer beads turning beneath the fingers of time. Each fall of plankton to the ocean floor was almost imperceptible, a whisper settling into silence, and yet, over millions of years, those whispers became something solid. Chalk. The cliffs before you are composed of these countless fallen forms, each pale grain once part of a living breath, each layer a page in a book no one remembers writing. Stand close, and you may notice faint impressions pressed into their surfaces, fossils sealed within the white stone like forgotten letters, a fish suspended mid-swim, its delicate bones outlined in ghostly detail, a shell cupped like an open palm, a spiral etched in quiet perfection. They are messages from a sea that no longer exists. Whispers tell us that this sea once divided the continent. It flowed between eastern and western lands that did not yet know themselves as separate. Tides carried life back and forth, fish, reptiles, drifting colonies of coral, binding distant shores in an invisible exchange. Above the water, seabirds traced wide arcs across a vast sky. Below, mosasaurs moved through shadowed depths, and beneath them all, on the silent ocean floor, plankton settled in patient accumulation. It is easy to imagine that something so monumental must have arrived with spectacle, that waves crashed into existence with thunder and lightning. But the sea here was born from gentler movements, the slow bending of the earth's crust, the subtle rising of waters into a shallow basin. It came like a long inhale, and for ages it remained. Sunlight shimmered across its surface, storms passed and cleared, creatures fed and were fed upon. The shoreline shifted softly with the turning of seasons. All the while, beneath the silence, chalk gathered. Some believe that geological time is too vast for the human mind to hold, that millions of years are abstractions without texture or feeling. But perhaps there is another way to sense it, not as a number but as rhythm. Imagine the sea floor as a vast altar, each drifting skeleton a grain of incense falling upon it. The ocean breathes in, the ocean breathes out, and with each breath another delicate form settles into place. Layer upon layer, a cathedral rising in secret. The cliffs, glowing now under moonlight, are the unveiled face of that cathedral. They rise from fields of wheat as though shaped by unseen hands. Their whiteness is almost celestial, reflecting light back into the night like a quiet lantern. And yet they are fragile. A touch leaves dust on your fingertips, a soft powder that carries the memory of tides. Where memory fades, stone remembers. Embedded within the chalk are fossils that speak without sound, fish caught in eternal stillness, shells curved in patient spirals, the faint outline of scales or fins. They appear as if mid-motion, paused in a sacred suspension. It is said that fossils are not just remnants of life, but thresholds. They invite us to step between worlds, to feel the water that once enveloped them, to sense the currents that carried their bodies through green light. And yet, the sea did not remain. Without violence, without cataclysm, it withdrew. The continents shifted again. The basin lifted, water grew shallow and then shallower still. The tides receded in increments too small to notice within a single lifetime. Marsh became meadow, reef became rock. The seabed rose slowly toward the sun. What had been submerged for ages emerged into wind and dust. The transformation was patient, almost tender, as though the earth itself was lifting a veil from the water's face. The sea did not vanish in anger, it exhaled, and left behind its breath in stone. Now these cliffs stand beneath open sky, rain touches them, frost creeps into their crevices, wheat fields sway below them in long golden tides that echo the motion of water long gone. The contradiction lingers, soft and sacred. How could something so vast dissolve without visible sorrow? How could an ocean that once carried giants become dust on the wind? Perhaps the sorrow is there, but too slow for us to see. Perhaps the grief of the sea is written not in tears, but in chalk, white and luminous, fragile and enduring. In forgotten corners of the earth, similar cliffs rise, along coastlines, beside quiet villages, at the edge of fields where sheep graze. Each one a reminder that land is not fixed, that what feels eternal has been reshaped countless times beneath celestial watch. Tonight, beneath the moon, the chalk glows pale and serene. You place your hand against it once more. The surface feels cool, almost soft. A faint dust clings to your skin, a residue of ancient plankton, of oceanic drift, of lives too small to name and too numerous to count. Even dust carries the hush of waves. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen. The wind moves across the wheat below, creating ripples that mimic a tide. The sound is faint, a gentle rustling like distant surf. For a moment, land and sea overlap in your imagination, the fields becoming water, the cliffs returning to shoreline. It is said that stone never forgets water, that even after the ocean withdraws, even after the seabed rises into air, the memory remains folded within the rock like a sacred scroll. Look up. The stars above are the same stars that once reflected on the surface of that ancient sea. Their light shimmered in moonlit ripples long before these cliffs saw sky. Marked by the moon, the chalk holds that reflection still. Perhaps the sea was never meant to stay. Perhaps its purpose was to gather breath and release it, to divide and then reunite the land, to leave behind something quieter than waves, something that could endure wind and frost and time itself. Now the cliffs stand in silence. They do not mourn. They do not boast. They simply hold their layers, millions upon millions of drifting lives pressed into white stone. And as night deepens, you feel the weight of that slow accumulation, not as burden, but as presence. The world you walk upon is layered with forgotten tides. Beneath fields and roads and sleeping towns lies the breath of ancient oceans. The cliffs gleam one last time beneath the celestial glow. You step back, leaving them to their quiet vigil. Perhaps it was never meant to be found. Perhaps the chalk was meant only to rise, pale and luminous, to remind us that even stone remembers water. And as you turn away, the wind brushes the fields again, soft, oceanic, endless. Beneath the silence, the tide continues, not in waves but in memory. There is a place in the quiet center of the continent where the wind seems to hesitate. It is said that if you stand there at dusk, when the sky turns pale and endless and the earth glows with the last breath of sunlight, you may feel something beneath your feet that does not belong to the present, a thinning, a memory of separation. Long ago, at the heart of what we now call North America, there was a narrow bridge of land, thin as a breath between two seas. To the east, waters shimmered beneath a wide and ancient sky. To the west, another oceanic body moved in slow, tidal rhythms. And between them, this fragile corridor of earth, marshy, green and temporary, held the weight of a divided world. Imagine it now. The air is warm. The horizon is veiled in a faint, oceanic haze. Reeds bend along the shoreline. Insects hum above shallow pools where salt and fresh water mingle in quiet uncertainty. Dinosaurs move through the grasses, unaware that the ground beneath them is not eternal. They graze along marshy edges, their shadows long against the tide-washed sand. They do not know they stand at the edge of a continent in two halves. It is said that geography is a silent sculptor, that the shape of land determines the paths of life, the boundaries of evolution, the hidden destinies of species yet unborn. Here, in this narrow bridge between waters, destiny was being shaped in ways no creature could see. The inland sea had risen during an age of shifting plates and swelling oceans. The earth inhaled deeply, and the waters flowed inward, filling a vast basin that stretched from what is now the Gulf to the distant northern reaches of the Arctic. The sea divided the land with patient insistence, creating two separate worlds. Some believe that division is always violent, but this was not a fracture born of sudden force. It was a slow unfolding. The land dipped, the waters entered, shorelines redrew themselves like ink spreading across parchment, and where there had once been a single sweep of terrain, there were now two distant shores, gazing across a luminous expanse. To the west, mountain ranges were rising, ancient uplifts that would one day become the Rockies. To the east, lowlands stretched toward another ocean, quieter but no less vast. Between them lay the seaway, a shimmering corridor of salt and memory. And at its narrowest point, this thin strip of land, the bridge, held firm, though only for a time. Whispers tell us that life on either side began to drift apart in subtle ways. Creatures isolated by water evolved differently, shaped by currents and climates unique to their side of the divide. Small variations deepen with generations, forms diverge, colors shift, calls change. The sea became both barrier and cradle. Barrier because it prevented migration, severed connections, enforced solitude. Cradle because within its waters and along its shores, new ecosystems flourished. Coral reefs blossomed, ammonites spiraled through green depths. Marine reptiles claimed dominion over warm currents. Above the water, seabirds traced arcs between distant lands that could not touch. It is said that the earth breathes, that continents move not as rigid slabs, but as slow dancers, gliding atop molten depths. During this age, the planet inhaled and the sea advanced. It exhaled, and the waters withdrew. With each breath, the identity of the land shifted. The narrow bridge did not remain unchanged. Storms battered its edges, tides gnawed at its flanks, sediment gathered and washed away. It was a threshold, neither fully sea nor fully continent, but something in between. Imagine standing upon it. To the east, endless water gleams beneath a celestial sky. To the west, another sea stretches toward a horizon blurred by mist. The wind carries salt from both directions, mingling in the air like two whispered languages. Below your feet, the earth feels fragile, and yet, for a time, it endured. Dinosaurs walked this bridge as though it were permanent. Herds migrated across it. Predators followed their scent. Nesting grounds formed along its marshy edges. Life moved freely along this corridor, unaware of its temporary nature. Beneath the silence, though, the plates continued their slow pilgrimage. The mystery here is subtle, almost tender. How many creatures lived only because this land existed? How many paths were shaped by the presence of this fragile connection? What species might have evolved differently had the sea risen higher or withdrawn sooner? Geography shapes destiny in ways unseen. It is said that every shoreline is a decision made by the earth, every mountain a boundary drawn in stone, every sea a veil placed between histories. The Western Interior Seaway was one such veil. For millions of years, it held the continent apart. Eastern and western lands grew accustomed to their separation. Forests developed under different skies. Fauna diverged in quiet isolation. And then, as gently as it had arrived, the sea began to retreat. The earth exhaled, water levels lowered, the basin lifted. Shorelines crept inward with such gradual motion that no single creature could mark the day of change. The narrow bridge widened. Marsh became meadow. Sea floor emerged into sun and wind. The divide dissolved. Two worlds became one again. The continent, once split, rejoined in silence. But the memory of separation lingered, in fossil records, in sediment layers, in the subtle differences between species that had once been kept apart. In forgotten corners of the earth, pale cliffs and chalk beds bear witness to that division. Fossils of marine life lie embedded far from any modern coast. Their presence speaks of a time when water ruled this heartland. Where memory fades, stone remembers. Now imagine returning to that ancient bridge at the narrowest point of the divide. The The sky above is pale and endless. The air is heavy with warmth. On either side of you, the sea stretches toward distant horizons. The sound of waves is constant, rhythmic, almost sacred. You stand at the center of a continent in two halves. Below, the earth hums with slow tectonic breath. The future Rockies are rising far to the west. The eastern lowlands slope gently toward another ocean. Between them, this thin corridor holds. It is both fragile and immense. Marked by the moon, the water shimmers silver at night. Stars reflect in twin expanses on either side of your path. For a moment, it feels as though you walk between mirrors, sky above, sky below. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen. If you close your eyes, you may sense the subtle tension of separation, the quiet loneliness of lands divided, and then, beneath that, the promise of reunion. For the earth does not remain fixed in division. It shifts, it heals, it redraws its boundaries in dust and stone. Eventually the sea will vanish, the bridge will broaden into plains, creatures from east and west will meet again on unified ground. New stories will begin, but in this suspended moment, the continent is still two, still divided by shimmering waters, still shaped by distance and isolation, and you stand at the threshold, aware that even this division is temporary. Perhaps it was never meant to last. Perhaps the sea's purpose was not to separate, but to teach the land the feeling of distance, so that reunion would carry its own quiet meaning. The wind moves softly across the narrow bridge. Waves murmur on either side. Above, the celestial sky watches without judgment. Below, the continent waits, patient, veiled, breathing, ready to become whole again. And as the vision fades, as the prairie returns and the seas dissolve into memory, you carry with you the echo of that ancient divide. A reminder that what feels separate today may one day reunite, that beneath the silence of land and dust, the earth is always moving, always breathing, always shaping destinies in ways too gentle to notice until we listen. The field is quiet beneath an open sky. It is early morning. A pale light spills across the prairie, touching rows of corn and the distant line of trees with a soft golden hush. The air carries the scent of soil and dew. Somewhere, a lone bird calls into the stillness. A farmer moves slowly across the land, guiding a plough through dark earth. The blade turns the soil in long, patient furrows. Dust rises gently, then settles again like breath returning to rest. It is said that the earth keeps its secrets close. But sometimes, in the simple rhythm of ordinary work, something ancient resists the blade. A sudden hardness beneath the soil, a subtle jolt in the steady motion. The farmer pauses, bends down, brushes aside loose dirt with quiet curiosity. And there, lifted into morning light, is the curve of a shell, spiraled, perfect, ancient. It rests in his palm like a small moon carved from stone. Its ridges are delicate, its symmetry unbroken. Dust clings to its chambers. The spiral curls inward with patient geometry, as though it remembers something the rest of the land has forgotten. In forgotten corners of the earth, such objects surface without ceremony. No temple surrounds them. No altar awaits their arrival. They appear in fields, in road cuts, in riverbanks, sacred relics scattered across ordinary ground. The farmer turns the fossil over slowly. He does not see the ocean. He sees only stone. And yet, within that stone lies the echo of waves. It is said that fossils are both presence and absence. They are the shape of what was, pressed into endurance. They are memory given weight. This spiral once belonged to a living being. Long before corn roots gripped this soil, before fences traced boundaries across the plains, before roads stitched the land into measured squares, there was a sea here, warm, shallow, luminous. The ammonite drifted through sunlit waters, its shell spiraling outward as it grew. Chamber by chamber, it built its home, each curve a record of survival, each ridge a quiet testament to time. Imagine it now, green light filtering down through gentle currents, the surface of the sea rippling beneath a wide and ancient sky, plankton drifting like dust motes in liquid air, fish flashing silver in passing schools. The ammonite moves with the tide, neither hurried nor still. Its tentacles extend softly into the surrounding water, sensing the faint tremors of life nearby. It knows nothing of prairies or plows, nothing of future centuries. It simply drifts, breathing, growing, turning in slow oceanic rhythm. Some believe that the spiral is one of nature's sacred forms. It appears in galaxies and shells, in storms and the curl of fern leaves. It is a symbol of expansion and return, of motion without end. In the ammonite's shell, this spiral became both shelter and archive. Each chamber sealed behind it as it grew forward, leaving behind a series of quiet rooms, small cathedrals of calcium and memory. Above the ammonite, seabirds traced arcs across the sky. Below, larger shadows moved, marine reptiles gliding through deeper currents. The inland sea was alive with motion, yet it held a sacred calm. Beneath the silence, plankton fell in delicate snowfall, gathering slowly on the ocean floor. Layer by layer, the seabed thickened with the remains of countless lives. The earth inhaled and exhaled through tectonic shifts. Continents moved in patient procession. And then, without spectacle, the sea began to retreat. It is said that the greatest transformations happen quietly. The waters shallowed, shorelines crept inward, marsh replaced reef. Sunlight reached farther down into thinning depths. Creatures adapted or vanished. The ammonite's life ended in its own time, as all lives do. Its shell sank gently to the ocean floor, settling into soft sediment. There it rested, cradled in silt and silence. Over millions of years, pressure gathered. Layers of sediment pressed downward. Minerals seeped into the shell's chambers, replacing fragile material with stone. The spiral endured. The sea withdrew entirely, the seabed rose toward the sun. What had been submerged became exposed to wind and dust. Rivers carved new paths, forests took root, grasslands spread wide beneath an open sky. The spiral remained buried. Where memory fades, stone remembers. Centuries passed, civilizations rose and crumbled in distant lands. The prairie formed its own quiet history, of migration, settlement, harvest, and rest. And beneath it all, the fossil waited. It is a sacred paradox, this transformation, how something once soft and living becomes stone, how time compresses breath into mineral form. Fossils are relics without temples, yet they carry a reverence all their own. The farmer brushes more dust from the shell. Its ridges catch the light. For a moment, prairie and ocean overlap. The wind moves across the field in slow waves, bending the young corn. The sound is faint, like distant surf. The sky above stretches vast and unbroken, perhaps not so different from the sky that once reflected in ancient waters. Marked by the moon in ages past, the ammonite now rests beneath sunlight and starlight alike. The farmer places it gently on a fence post or carries it home to rest on a windowsill. It becomes a small curiosity, a conversation piece, a reminder that the land has deeper stories than fences and furrows, but beneath the silence, the fossil hums with older tides. Whispers tell us that countless such spirals lie hidden beneath our steps, that fields and forests conceal ocean floors, that beneath cities and highways, layers of seabed wait patiently in the dark. How many seas lie buried beneath the earth we call solid? How many creatures drifted through waters where we now walk without thought? It is said that the ground is never only ground. It is archive, it is scroll. It is a layered manuscript written in dust and pressure and time. The ammonite spiral is not merely decoration, it is a doorway. A reminder that what we see as fixed was once fluid, that what feels permanent has been shaped by currents and tides beyond imagining. As evening approaches, the farmer's field grows quiet once more. The sun lowers toward the horizon, casting long shadows across the furrows. The fossil, resting in the fading light, glows softly, its pale stone holding a hint of the oceanic past. Perhaps it was never meant to be found. Perhaps it waited only for a moment of recognition, for someone to pause, to wonder, to trace the curve of its spiral and feel the weight of forgotten water. The prairie wind moves again, brushing across soil and stalk. The sound is gentle, almost tidal, and in that hush, the boundaries between eras soften. The field becomes seabed, the sky becomes reflected surface, the spiral becomes both memory and presence. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen. The fossil in the farmer's field is one such voice, quiet, veiled, enduring. It asks no questions directly. It offers no clear answers. It simply rests, a small sacred object scattered across ordinary land. And as night falls and stars gather overhead, you may imagine countless spirals hidden beneath the soil, buried, patient, waiting for a blade to turn the earth, waiting for a hand to lift them into light, waiting for someone to notice the curve in the dust and remember that once, here, there was a sea. The spiral begins in silence. It is night, and you sit beneath a star-marked sky. The air is cool. The world feels hushed, as though it too is listening. In your palm rests a small, ancient object, pale, ridged, curved with quiet precision. An ammonite fossil. Its surface is cool beneath your fingers. The spiral turns inward endlessly, each chamber wrapped around the last, as if protecting a secret at its center. It is said that the spiral is older than language, that long before words were etched into clay or inked upon scrolls, the spiral was already written into the fabric of the world, into galaxies, into shells, into storms and seeds. You trace the ammonite's curve gently, feeling its ridges like the faint steps of time itself. Once, this spiral drifted through waters that covered half a continent. Close your eyes for a moment and allow the present to soften. The prairie dissolves. The fields and towns and distant highways fade like breath upon glass. In their place rises a warm, shallow sea, green and luminous beneath a younger sun. The western interior seaway stretches beyond sight, its waters shimmering under celestial light. Beneath its surface, life moves in slow procession. And there, among the drifting plankton and coral gardens, the ammonite swims. Its body extends from the shell's outer chamber, soft, tentacled, sensing the world through gentle currents. It does not hurry. It does not resist the tide. It drifts in rhythm with the ocean's breath. The spiral shell behind it is not merely decoration, it is architecture, it is memory in motion. Each chamber the ammonite builds marks a season of growth. When it outgrows one space, it seals it behind with a delicate wall of calcium and moves forward into a new room. The past remains intact, preserved in a silent series of chambers spiraling inward. Some believe that this is how time itself moves, not as a straight line, but as a curve folding gently upon itself, each moment sealed yet never lost, each memory contained within the architecture of our being. Beneath the silence of the sea, millions of ammonites drift. Their shells catch the light in pale arcs. From above, they might resemble a constellation scattered beneath water, small moons turning slowly in green twilight. We drift with them now. Past reefs blossoming with coral polyps, past schools of fish flashing like silver script in the currents, past towering marine reptiles gliding in deeper shadow. The sea is alive, yet it carries a sacred calm. It is not the violent ocean of storms and shipwrecks. It is warm, almost cradling, a vast womb of motion and light. The ammonites multiply in these waters. Their spirals become common symbols of life's quiet abundance. They inhabit shallow shelves and deeper channels, adapting to subtle changes in depth and temperature. Whispers tell us that they had already endured for hundreds of millions of years before this inland sea even formed. Long before the age of dinosaurs reached its height, ammonites drifted through ancient oceans. They witnessed epochs beyond human comprehension. They survived extinctions, they adapted, they spiraled forward. And yet, even the spiral must meet its pause. It is said that near the end of the Cretaceous period, something shifted in the delicate balance of the world. A celestial body, an asteroid, crossed the vastness of space and struck the Earth in what is now the Yucatan Peninsula. The impact was sudden. But let us not dwell in fire or thunder. Instead, imagine the sea growing dim, dust rising into the atmosphere, veiling the sun, waters cooling, food chains faltering in quiet succession. The ammonites, so long resilient, find the currents altered, the plankton scarce. One by one, their spirals cease. The great marine reptiles vanish alongside them. Dinosaurs on distant shores disappear. The age of giants closes like a scroll carefully rolled shut. It is tempting to see this as an ending. But the spiral suggests something else. When the ammonite's life ended, its shell sank gently to the ocean floor. It settled into soft sediment, another small moon resting in silt and silence. There it lay, chamber by chamber, holding the shape of time within its coils. Layers of sediment gathered above it. Pressure mounted. Minerals seeped into the shell's hollow spaces, replacing fragile material with stone. Over millions of years, the spiral hardened into fossil, its form preserved even as its flesh dissolved. The sea itself would later withdraw. The seabed would rise toward the sun. What had been submerged would become land, chalk cliffs, limestone beds, fields of wheat and corn. And within those stones, the ammonite endured. You open your eyes again. The fossil in your palm is no longer a drifting creature, yet it carries within it the echo of that ancient sea. Its chambers are sealed, yet they speak of growth. Its spiral is fixed, yet it suggests motion. Even through extinction, the form remains. Some believe that extinction is erasure, but fossils tell a quieter story. They are relics without temples, sacred objects scattered across ordinary land. They hold within them the weight of planetary grief and the whisper of continuity. The spiral suggests that nothing truly vanishes. It transforms. It returns in another form. In forgotten corners of the earth, chalk cliffs glow pale beneath moonlight. Embedded within them are countless ammonites, pressed into limestone like stars captured in stone. They appear as small, luminous discs against white rock, as though the sea left behind its own constellation. Where memory fades, the spiral remains. Time, like the ammonite's shell, does not simply march forward. It curves, it encloses, it folds back upon itself, each chamber connected to the last. You trace the fossil's ridges again, feeling the subtle grooves shaped by an ancient ocean. Beneath the silence of your surroundings, you sense something older than language, an echo of water, of slow tides, of patient growth. As night deepens, imagine the inland sea once more. It stretches across the continent, luminous and warm. Beneath its surface, countless spirals drift in green light. The sky above reflects in gentle ripples. The world feels vast and unbroken. The ammonite swims without knowledge of its eventual fossilization. It does not know it will one day rest in your hand. It simply moves forward, building chamber after chamber, sealing each moment behind it. Perhaps that is all any of us do. Build, seal, move forward, and yet within us the earlier chambers remain, marked by the moon, veiled in memory. The ammonite no longer swims. Its lineage ended in that distant age, but its shape endures, whispering across epochs. Whispering that time is not a straight line, vanishing into distance. It is a spiral, returning gently to its center. As you sit beneath the star-marked sky, the fossil rests quietly in your palm. The wind moves softly through grass or trees nearby, carrying a faint oceanic rhythm. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen. The Ammonite spiral is one such voice. It speaks of ancient seas and vanished worlds, of extinction and endurance, of chambers built in darkness and revealed in light. Perhaps it was never meant to be found. Perhaps it was meant simply to endure, waiting in stone until someone traced its curve and felt the hush of waves long gone. And as sleep begins to gather at the edges of your awareness, imagine that spiral drifting once more through green water, slow, luminous, eternal. Time folding inward, returning, always returning. Beneath the surface of a vanished sea, light trembles like a veil of silk. It is said that if you descend slowly enough into ancient water, past the rippling mirror of the sky, past the drifting veils of plankton, you enter a world not of noise, but of suspended breath. The sun filters down in pale shafts, bending and breaking against the slow rhythm of tides. Everything moves, yet nothing hurries. There, in the green cathedral of the deep, a shadow glides. Before whales ruled the oceans, before their songs carried across abyssal plains, another sovereign moved through warm inland waters. The mosasaur, long, powerful, serpent-like, drifted through the western interior seaway as its quiet dominion. But it is not a monster we meet here, it is an ancient presence. Its body undulates in slow, effortless waves. Its tail sweeps with patient authority. Its jaws, lined with curved teeth, remain closed, not in hunger, but in calm assurance. The mosasaur does not thrash. It does not roar. It simply exists within the sacred geometry of water. Some believe that power need not be loud. The mosasaur is woven into the rhythm of tides, as natural as the currents that cradle it. Around it, coral gardens bloom in silent color. Reefs rise like crumbled citadels beneath the sea, their surfaces alive with delicate polyps and darting fish. Schools shimmer in silver spirals, shifting as one organism at the slightest change in pressure. The sea feels boundless, warm, almost eternal. Above, the surface shimmers with celestial light. The sky's reflection trembles in ripples, marked by the moon at night and by a golden sun in day. Seabirds wheel in distant arcs, their shadows briefly crossing the water's skin before dissolving into brightness. Below, the mosasaur moves as though guided by memory older than bone. It is said that the western interior seaway once split the continent in two, dividing east from west with a corridor of oceanic depth. In these waters, the mosasaur found its realm, a vast inland ocean stretching from southern warmth to northern chill. Whispers tell us that it grew to immense lengths, over 40 feet in some cases, its body a living curve, its movement a hymn to fluidity. But here, in this slow descent into dream space, we do not measure it in feet or teeth. We measure it in presence. The mosasaur drifts past a school of fish, and the fish part without panic. It is not hunger that defines this creature in our vision, but belonging. It is both predator and participant, sovereign and servant to the sea's greater design. In forgotten corners of the earth, pale chalk cliffs now hold the imprint of its bones. But in this moment, beneath green light, the mosasaur is alive, its dark eye reflecting shafts of sun, its skin rippling with the subtle pulse of muscle beneath scale. Beneath the silence, currents speak. The sea breathes in gentle tides. Sediment settles in soft snowfall upon the ocean floor. Ammonites spiral through the water column, their shells glinting faintly. Plesiosaurs glide in distant silhouettes, long necks tracing elegant arcs. The mosasaur's dominion is not built of stone or throne. It is built of motion, of water shaped around its form, of territories defined not by borders, but by currents and scent. And yet even dominion is temporary. It is said that the earth shifts in ways too slow for its inhabitants to perceive. Tectonic plates rise and fall like the chest of a sleeping giant. Seas flood basins, then retreat. Continents divide, then reunite. The western interior seaway was born of such a breath, and one day it would recede by the same quiet exhale. But for now the sea is whole. The mosasaur drifts through coral gardens where light dapples like scattered coins. It passes over sandy shelves where rays bury themselves in dust. It circles through deeper channels where shadows gather like unspoken thoughts. There is no urgency in its motion, only rhythm. Above the water, on distant marshy shores, dinosaurs move through reeds. They are unaware of the silent sovereign beneath the waves. Their feet press into sediment that will one day harden into stone, carrying impressions of an age of giants. The world feels immense, unbroken. Yet beneath the surface of time, change gathers. It is said that near the end of the Cretaceous, the sky itself altered. A celestial body crossed the heavens and struck the earth with unimaginable force. Fire and dust rose. Sunlight dimmed, temperatures shifted. But here, in the slow ceremony of night listening, we do not dwell in catastrophe. We dwell in contraction. The sea begins to shrink, not in a single day, not in a single season, but breath by breath. Shorelines creep inward, depths grow shallower, currents change their patterns, coral gardens pale, food chains falter in quiet succession, the mosasaur's world narrows, the vast dominion of water becomes segmented, reduced to pockets and channels. The ancient presence continues to glide, unaware of the magnitude of transformation unfolding beyond its perception. It is said that extinction rarely feels like an ending while it happens. It feels like subtle imbalance, a thinning of abundance, a silence growing where there was once song. And then, one day, the mosasaur no longer moves. Its immense body sinks gently through dim water, settling into sediment upon the ocean floor. Sand drifts over bone. Time begins its patient work. Layers of silt gather. Minerals seep into porous spaces. The skeleton hardens into stone. The sea continues to retreat, lifting its floor towards sunlight. What had been dominion becomes relic. The seabed rises into prairie. Coral gardens become limestone. The inland ocean dissolves into dust and memory. Where memory fades, stone remembers. Now, let us ascend once more, through green water, through vanished tides, through epochs layered like scrolls of chalk, and return to the present. It is evening. A museum hall stands quiet at closing time. The lights are dimmed to a gentle glow. Footsteps echo faintly, then cease. The doors close with a soft finality. In the center of the gallery arches a cathedral of bone. The mosasaur's skeleton stretches overhead, long spine curving like a frozen wave, ribs forming a sacred cage of ivory. Its jaws are open in silent perpetuity, teeth bared not in menace, but in permanence. Marked by the moon through high windows, its bones gleam pale against shadowed walls. Visitors have departed, children's whispers have faded. The hall rests in hush. You stand alone beneath the arch of that ancient frame. It is said that bones hold echoes. In the quiet of the gallery, you almost hear water moving again, not loudly, not with crash or roar, but a faint oceanic murmur, currents sliding past coral gardens, light trembling through green depths. The sea it once knew is gone. Farmlands now stretch over its former bed. Prairie wind moves across wheat in slow tidal waves. Farmers walk fields where mosasaurs once swam, and yet the dominion endures in shape, in fossil, in memory pressed into chalk. Perhaps it was never meant to last. Perhaps the mosasaur's reign was always a chapter in a greater spiral, one that curves through presence and absence alike. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen. In the hush of the museum, beneath the arching bones, you sense that ancient presence once more, not as predator, not as sovereign, but as reminder. That even the greatest dominion dissolves, that water becomes stone, that silence becomes fossil, and that beneath the surface of ordinary land, the sea still sleeps, veiled, buried, whispering in dust. As night deepens outside, stars gather over the prairie where waves once rolled. The museum lights dim further, leaving the skeleton bathed in soft shadow. The mosasaur no longer swims, but its form endures, a spiral of vertebrae, a curve of rib and jaw, a cathedral built of bone. And in that stillness, you almost feel the tide returning, just for a moment, before it fades again into the sacred quiet of sleep. At the edge of evening, a river bends through the plains like a silver thread drawn across darkening cloth. The sky is lavender, fading into indigo. Grasses lean toward the water as if listening. A pale moon has already risen, marked by the moon in quiet authority, casting a trembling path of light across the slow current. You stand at the bank. The air is cool. The world is hushed. And it is said that beneath this gentle river, beneath its modest width and patient flow, lies the memory of something vast. Long before wheat fields whispered in the wind, long before fences stitched the horizon into careful lines, there was an inland sea here, broad and breathing, warm beneath a younger sun. It split the continent in two, a corridor of salt and tide, where now there is soil and root. The sea withdrew, but it did not forget. Some believe that landscapes remember what they have been, that stone holds the echo of water, that rivers follow not only gravity, but ghostly paths carved long ago in ancient depths. The river before you winds through plains at dusk, calm and silver, yet its course traces the scars left behind by that vanished seaway. It flows along softened ridges and subtle depressions shaped by tides millions of years past. Beneath the silence, geography whispers. The western interior seaway once stretched from what is now the Gulf of Mexico to the cold north. It inhaled and exhaled with rising and falling waters, depositing sediment in layers like sacred scrolls laid gently upon one another. When it receded, breath by breath, epoch by epoch, it left behind more than fossils. It left behind form. And now, long after the ocean withdrew, rivers trace its former path as if remembering a deeper channel carved in salt water. The river glides over soil rich with ancient sediment. Each grain beneath its surface once drifted in warm, shallow seas. Microscopic shells of plankton fell like snow to the seabed. Soft silt gathered in patient layers. Time pressed them into chalk, into limestone, into fertile earth. The river does not know this in the way humans know, but it follows the contours anyway. In forgotten corners of the earth, geologists read these layers like archivists studying a buried manuscript. They find marine fossils far from any shore, ammonites spiraled in stone, fish bones suspended in rock like sealed letters. They uncover salt deposits where grasses now sway. And yet, the river flows without lecture or explanation. It simply moves. It is said that water remembers every shape it has touched. Perhaps that is why rivers seem so faithful to ancient basins, why they follow depressions carved by seas that no longer shimmer under sun. The contradiction is gentle. What appears purely terrestrial is born of ocean. The fields that grow corn and wheat draw nourishment from sediments once stirred by tides. Forests root themselves in soil composed of crushed shells and marine dust. Even the river's own bed carries particles that once drifted through salt water, suspended in green light. Whispers tell us that the sea may retreat, but its essence remains. Look closer. The riverbank reveals layers of pale stone, soft and crumbled at the edges. Touch it, and it feels almost powdery, as though it still holds the hush of waves. Embedded within are small fossils, spirals and fragments shaped by creatures that swam in warmth unimaginable beneath this cool prairie dusk. The river curves as if following an old scar. Some believe that continents themselves carry memory, that the earth, though silent, is not forgetful. When tectonic plates shifted and mountains rose in distant west, they changed the tilt of basins and redirected waters. The sea exhaled, the continent reclaimed its center, but the basin remained, And into that basin rain fell, snow melted, streams gathered, a river was born along the outline of a vanished tide. You watch as the current glides around a bend, reflecting stars just beginning to appear. The moonlight stretches across its surface like a pale ribbon, trembling but unbroken. The river does not roar, it does not declare itself. It murmurs. It is said that rivers are the veins of the land, carrying lifeblood from mountain to plain. But perhaps they are also the echoes of something older, a quiet continuation of oceanic breath reshaped into freshwater hymn. Beneath the surface, small fish dart in silver flashes. Sediment swirls in gentle spirals, then settles again. The movement is constant but unhurried, like the turning of prayer beads beneath unseen fingers. In geological time, the transformation from sea to river was patient. As the seaway withdrew, the seabed rose toward sunlight. Coral gardens hardened into stone, salt marshes dried into plains. The vast inland ocean dissolved into soil and sky. No single moment marked its end, no thunderous final wave. Just a gradual thinning of salt, a soft retreat of shoreline, a quiet lifting of land. And then rain. Rain that fell upon exposed earth, carving channels where currents once ruled. Rain that gathered into streams, then rivers, tracing the same depressions where tides had once flowed. The water changed form, but not purpose. It still moved. It still shaped the land. Some believe that nothing truly disappears in this world. It only becomes something else. The inland sea became river, salt became soil, coral reef became limestone cliff, and now, under moonlight, the river carries particles of ancient plankton in suspension, microscopic relics of oceanic bloom drifting in freshwater current. Where memory fades, form remains. You kneel by the bank and let your fingers dip into the cool water. It feels ordinary, clear, gentle, terrestrial, yet within it is the echo of salt, diluted beyond taste, but not beyond history. It is said that even in freshwater streams far from any coast, there are traces of marine origin in the soil they traverse, tiny fragments of shell, of chalk, of ancient dust shaped by tides. The river carries these remnants toward distant oceans, completing a cycle invisible to the casual eye. In this way, the sea never fully left, it simply changed its voice. As dusk deepens, the prairie grows quiet. Crickets begin their soft rhythm. A breeze moves through tall grasses in slow tidal waves, echoing a motion older than wind. The river continues its journey, winding through plains that were once seabed. It passes beneath bridges and beside fields. It feeds roots that stretch downward into sediment laid by vanished currents. The land appears solid, certain. But beneath it lies the layered memory of ocean. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen. Stand here long enough, and you may sense the deeper channel beneath the visible one, the ghost of the seaway flowing beneath the river's silver skin. It is not a haunting, it is continuity. The earth inhaled and exhaled, and water took new shape. Above, stars emerge fully now, scattered across indigo sky. They shine as they did when mosasaurs glided through warm depths. They reflect upon the river's surface as once they reflected upon inland seas. The same celestial lights, different water. The river bends again, vanishing into twilight. It merges with darkness, carrying with it particles of chalk and shell, of ancient plankton and prairie dust. It flows onward, eventually joining larger currents, then perhaps an ocean far from here. In that distant meeting, fresh water and salt will mingle once more. The cycle closes without announcement. No sea ever truly disappears. It simply becomes something else. A river, a field, a whisper beneath soil. You remain at the bank as night settles fully around you. The moonlight trembles across the water's skin. The current moves in patient silence. Beneath the silence, the land remembers. And as your breath slows to match the rhythm of the stream, you sense that loss is not the story here. Transformation is. The inland sea has not vanished. It has become river. And the river, in its quiet devotion to gravity and earth, continues the ancient work of shaping a continent, breath by breath, tide by tide, under stars that have watched every change without judgment. Perhaps it was never meant to be found. Perhaps it was always meant to flow on, veiled yet present, whispering through freshwater channels that the sea is never gone. It is only moving, into dust, into soil, into river light, waiting for someone to stand at dusk and listen. At the edge of a shallow coast, just before dawn, the world holds its breath. The horizon is veiled in pale silver. The sky has not yet chosen its color. The sea lies smooth and hushed, as if resting after a long vigil. A faint mist hovers above the water, blurring the boundary between ocean and air. You stand barefoot where the tide usually reaches. But this morning, the water is farther away. It is said that there was no single day when the sea declared its departure. No trumpet of wind, no thunderous retreat. The water did not rise in rebellion, nor crash in farewell. It withdrew slowly, almost politely. The tide seems unusually low, but no one, no creature grazing along the marsh, no fish gliding through the shallows, could sense the immensity of what had begun. The shoreline shifts by inches. A narrow strip of wet sand remains exposed just a little longer than before. Tiny shells glisten in new light. Seaweed lies draped over stones, breathing in air for the first time. Reefs, once cradled in green water, find themselves brushed by wind. The earth inhales, and somewhere beneath the silence, tectonic forces continue their patient work. Plates press and lift, basins rise imperceptibly. The vast inland sea, once full and sovereign, begins to thin. It is said that the greatest transformations do not announce themselves. They unfold like the turning of a page in a book no one knows they are reading. Over years, the tide continues to lower. Over centuries, the lowering becomes undeniable. Shorelines that once shimmered beneath constant waves now lie exposed at midday. Marsh becomes meadow. Pools of salt water shrink into brackish ponds. Creatures accustomed to the rhythm of tides must adjust to a new pattern of stillness. There is no urgency in the earth's reshaping, no regret, only breath. At first, the changes are subtle. Fish that once swam in generous shallows find their world narrowed. Coral gardens, luminous and intricate, feel the kiss of air during longer intervals. Some endure, some pale. Whispers tell us that adaptation is a quiet art, that life, when given time, bends toward survival. New plants creep into newly revealed mudflats. Grasses take root where reeds once swayed in salt water. Insects gather over fresh pools. The sea does not vanish in a moment of grief. It loosens its hold. The day stretches into centuries. The waterline creeps outward, retreating as if guided by invisible hands. The vast inland sea that once split a continent begins to resemble a necklace of shrinking bays and channels. Seabed becomes shoreline, shoreline becomes plain. Imagine standing at dawn again, decades later. The water is farther still. The air smells less of salt. A faint crust of white lingers where waves once folded themselves against stone. It is said that patience is the earth's oldest language. Mountains rise without sound, valleys deepen in silence, oceans flood and recede, not with spectacle, but with repetition. The sea that once stretched from south to north across the continent now thins like ink drying on parchment. Reefs, once submerged cathedrals, stand crumbled and bleached. Ammonite shells lie stranded in silt, their spirals catching light for the last time in open air. Some creatures migrate toward deeper waters. Others cannot follow. The mosasaurs, sovereigns of warm depths, feel their dominion shrink. Their hunting grounds contract into narrower corridors. But there is no moment when the sea cries out. It simply becomes less. Over millennia, marsh becomes meadow, mudflats harden into soil, wind begins to sculpt what water once shaped. The seabed, long hidden beneath green light, rises toward the sun and discovers the sky. What once was ocean floor now holds the first delicate roots of terrestrial plants. In forgotten corners of this transforming land, pioneer grasses spread like soft green whispers across exposed sediment. Small creatures explore newly revealed spaces. The boundary between sea and land grows less certain, then finally settles into a new design. The mystery lies not in violence, it lies in imperceptible change. Imagine watching a single grain of sand shift. You would not notice it. Imagine watching a single inch of shoreline move. You would not see it. But over centuries, those inches become miles. It is said that time is not a river rushing forward. It is a tide, advancing and retreating in cycles too vast for the human eye. The inland sea, once luminous and full, continues to exhale. The horizon retreats. What had been endless water becomes isolated basins, then shallow lakes, then quiet marshes, and then, at last, plain. The final pools evaporate under sun. Salt lingers in crusted patterns. Fossils rest upon newly formed earth, their shapes delicate and veiled in dust. The creatures of the sea have either vanished or transformed. The age of giants closes gently, like a door eased shut without sound. Above, the same celestial sky remains. Marked by the moon, the land now glows pale where waves once shimmered. Stars reflect not in water, but in dew gathered upon grass. It is said that there was no single sunrise when the last tide withdrew. No creature stood upon a final shore and declared, "Now it is gone." The sea became memory. It became sediment pressed into limestone. It became chalk cliffs glowing beneath future moons. It became fertile soil, nourishing forests and fields yet unborn. Where memory fades, dust remembers. In the dust lie tiny fragments of shells that once drifted in sunlit water. In the soil rest grains, shaped by tides that no longer exist. In the contours of plains lie faint echoes of ancient currents. Stand at the edge of that shrinking shore in your imagination. The waves lap at a narrow band of sand. The horizon seems closer than before. The air carries a soft stillness, as though aware of the transition underway. The water withdraws another inch, another breath, and then another. The transformation is patient, almost tender. There is no urgency in the earth's movements, no lament, only reshaping. Over time, the once shallow coast becomes dry land. The seabed cracks beneath sun. Wind takes up the work that water began, carrying dust across the plain in slow spirals. Yet in that dust lies the quiet echo of tides. It is said that no sea ever truly disappears. It changes form. It becomes field. It becomes river. It becomes stone. The day the water began to leave was not marked by spectacle. It was marked by continuity. The sea exhaled and the land inhaled. The shoreline shifted and life adjusted. The horizon retreated and something new emerged. Now, under a twilight sky, imagine the last thin ribbon of water reflecting stars. The waves are gentle, the tide is low. Tomorrow it will be lower still. And in that slow retreat lies a sacred lesson. Vast transformations need not be loud. They can unfold like breath, like a candle burning down to its final glow, like water becoming dust beneath an endless, patient sky. Perhaps it was never meant to end in thunder. Perhaps it was meant to fade, to leave behind only silence and sediment. And in that silence, if you listen closely, you may still hear it. The faint, oceanic murmur carried in wind across open plain. A reminder that what once was water now rests in dust, and that even dust holds the hush of waves. Under an open and endless sky, the limestone cliffs glow pale as if lit from within. It is late evening. The sun has slipped below the horizon, leaving behind a wash of silver-blue light. The air is still. The world feels suspended between breath and silence. Before you rise, the bluffs, soft white, gently crumbled at the edges, their surfaces etched with faint lines and embedded shapes. From a distance, they appear smooth, almost cloud-like. But step closer, and the illusion dissolves. Within them are bones, fish with delicate ribs, shells cupped like open palms, fragments of ancient reptiles locked in stone as though mid-motion. They rest there not in decay, but in permanence. Prayers turn solid. It is said that stone is only memory slowed down. These cliffs were once ocean floor. Long before wind brushed these heights, long before grasses rooted at their base, warm inland waters shimmered here beneath a younger sun. The western interior seaway stretched across the continent, a luminous corridor dividing land into east and west. Beneath that water, life gathered in abundance. Plankton drifted in endless suspension, their tiny bodies luminous and fragile. Coral colonies blossomed in quiet gardens. Fish darted in silver flashes. Mosasaurs and plesiosaurs traced slow arcs through green depths. And always, beneath the movement, something settled. The delicate skeletons of plankton, calcium shells too small to notice, fell like sacred dust upon the seabed. Fish bones sank. Shells tumbled gently through currents before resting in silt. Layer upon layer, these remains gathered. The ocean floor became an archive of breath. It is said that time moves differently underwater. Sound softens, light bends, movement slows. The accumulation of sediment felt less like construction and more like meditation, a steady turning of invisible beads. Each grain of limestone once carried life within it. Each layer of cliff was once drifting, breathing, alive. Now, beneath the limestone sky, those lives have become architecture. The sacred contradiction is simple. Life becomes stone, and stone becomes shelter. Look up at the cliff face again. The pale rock catches the last light of day, glowing faintly beneath a rising moon. Embedded within it are fossils, spirals of ammonites, impressions of scales, the faint outline of vertebrae. They are not arranged in reverence, they are not enshrined in temples, and yet they hold a sacred stillness. In forgotten corners of the earth, entire landscapes are built from the remains of ancient seas. Limestone hills roll gently where coral reefs once stood. Chalk cliffs rise where plankton once drifted. Cities have been constructed from this stone. Walls, cathedrals, foundations, all shaped from the compacted breath of vanished oceans. It is said that when you walk through an old building of limestone, you walk through memory. The walls around you are composed of marine dust. The arches overhead are shaped from ancient shells. The floors beneath your feet are pressed from centuries of sediment laid gently upon the ocean floor. Stone becomes shelter. Shelter becomes civilization. And all of it rests upon life that once moved beneath water. Return now to the underwater world. Close your eyes and descend once more into green light. The sea stretches in every direction. Plankton drift in luminous clouds. Tiny fish flicker like sparks. Larger shadows move in patient arcs. The seabed below is soft and shifting. Fine silt gathers in ripples shaped by gentle currents. A fish dies and sinks slowly, its body folding into the sediment. A shell tumbles and settles, its spiral intact. There is no drama here, only continuity. Above, the surface shimmers with reflected sky. Below, the archive grows thicker, centuries pass in silence, millennia pass in quiet repetition, pressure increases, layers compress, minerals seep into hollow spaces, replacing fragile forms with enduring stone. The ocean does not intend to build cliffs, it simply breathes, and in its breathing, architecture emerges. When the sea began to retreat, breath by breath, the seabed rose toward the sun. What had been submerged became exposed to wind and rain. Coral reefs hardened into limestone ridges. Marine sediment became bluffs overlooking plains. The bones remained, silent, embedded. Where memory fades, stone remembers. Stand now at the base of the limestone cliff once more. Run your hand along its surface. The texture is soft, almost powdery. Tiny fragments crumble beneath your fingers, falling as pale dust onto the ground. That dust once drifted in ocean currents. That dust once held life. Above you, a fossilized fish lies suspended in rock, its delicate spine visible in faint relief. Nearby, the curve of an ammonite shell glows under moonlight, its spiral intact. They are not merely relics, they are foundation. It is said that even oceans can become ground beneath our feet. The sea that once roared here now rests as stone. The creatures that swam in its depths now form the bluffs that shelter fields and forests. The architecture of ancient life has become the landscape of the present. This is the sacred paradox. The ocean, vast and fluid, becomes fixed. The ephemeral becomes enduring. Life becomes stone, and stone becomes shelter. As night deepens, stars emerge one by one above the cliffs. The sky turns dark and luminous, scattered with distant light. Imagine for a moment the sea pressing against these bluffs once more. Imagine waves folding themselves gently against their pale faces. Imagine moonlight reflecting on green water, illuminating coral gardens below. The vision feels close, almost possible, but the water does not return. Instead, wind moves across the cliff's surface, carrying with it the faint scent of grass and soil. Crickets begin their evening song. The world rests in quiet terrestrial rhythm. The bones remain, silent yet enduring. In their stillness, they speak of cycles too vast to comprehend, of time folding upon itself like a spiral, of transformation without spectacle. It is said that foundations are rarely visible. They lie beneath, holding weight without recognition. The limestone cliffs are such foundations, formed from the breath of oceans, supporting the lives of creatures that will never know the water that birthed them. Perhaps it was never meant to be found. Perhaps the bones were meant simply to endure, pressed into stone, rising into sky, reminding us that even the greatest seas can become ground. As the moon climbs higher, the cliffs glow pale against darkness. The embedded fossils cast faint shadows in their cradles of rock. You stand beneath the limestone sky, aware that the land beneath you was once ocean floor, that the stone above you was once drifting life, that shelter itself can be born from tide. And in that awareness, a quiet reverence settles. The sea is gone, yet it remains, in bone, in cliff, in the dust that falls from ancient walls. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen. The bones beneath the limestone sky echo still, not in sound, but in presence. A reminder that nothing is lost, only transformed, only folded into new form, only waiting, silent and sacred beneath an open sky. The wind moves first. It travels low across the tall grass, bending each slender blade in long, rolling waves. From a distance, the prairie seems oceanic, its surface rising and falling beneath an invisible tide. The sky above is immense, unbroken, stretching from one horizon to the other like a vast, silent dome. You stand in the heart of the Great Plains, endless, dry, wind-swept. And yet, it is said that once these plains held tides. Close your eyes for a moment and listen, not to the hum of insects or the distant call of a bird, but to the rhythm beneath it all. The wind folds itself across the grass like surf against a shore that no longer exists. The plains appear certain in their stillness, but beneath the silence lies water. Long before fences stitched these horizons, long before herds moved in shadow across the land, a sea stretched here. The western interior seaway divided the continent, a luminous corridor of salt and shimmer where now only dust and soil remain. It is said that landscapes are veiled manuscripts. Their surface tells one story, their depths tell another. Walk across this open field, and you would never guess that beneath your feet lie fossil beds. Shells pressed into limestone, fish bones cradled in chalk, the faint imprint of scales and spirals. Where memory fades, stone remembers. The plains are a stage where ocean once performed. Imagine the shoreline as it once was, subtle and shifting, marked not by cliffs but by marsh and reed. Shallow waves lapped gently against mudflats. Dinosaurs grazed along the water's edge, their feet pressing into sediment that would one day harden into fossil. Fish flickered beneath reeds. Ammonites spiraled through green light just beyond the shallows. The sky above reflected in the quiet surface, a mirror of blue and cloud broken only by ripples. It is said that no creature standing at that ancient shore knew the water would vanish. To them, the sea was constant, but time, like tide, has its own rhythm. The earth inhaled, and the sea advanced. The earth exhaled, and the waters withdrew. Now, in place of shallow bays and coral gardens, there is grass. The horizon remains wide and luminous. The sky is still celestial and vast, but the water has retreated into memory. Or has it? Whispers tell us that beneath every wide plain lies a drowned history. Beneath the silence of this prairie are layers of sediment laid by tides, chalk formed from drifting plankton, limestone shaped from coral and shell, tiny grains of marine dust woven into the soil that now feeds grasses and grain. Run your hand through the dirt and you hold fragments of ocean. The sacred contradiction is simple. What feels dry was once submerged. What appears still was once fluid. It is said that wind remembers water. Watch the grass again as it bends in slow, sweeping arcs. Each gust creates ripples that mimic waves. The motion is so familiar, so oceanic, that for a moment the mind forgets there is no sea here. The plains breathe in silence. But beneath that silence, ancient currents echo. In forgotten corners of the Great Plains, pale outcrops rise from fields, chalk cliffs glowing softly under moonlight. Embedded within them are fossils of creatures that swam in warm inland waters. Mosasaurs, fish, ammonites. Farmers till soil once layered by tides. Children pick up spiral shells far from any modern coast. The prairie carries these relics without fanfare. It is said that the greatest stories often hide in open spaces. The plains do not declare their oceanic past. They do not roar with memory. They whisper, stand at dusk when the sky turns lavender and gold. Let the wind move across the grass like a slow tide. The air may carry a faint suggestion of salt, not in scent, but in sensation. A subtle awareness that this land was once cradled by waves. Trace the contours of the horizon. Subtle ridges rise and fall, barely noticeable unless you know to look. These are the ghostly outlines of ancient shorelines, shaped by long-vanished waters. Their curves are gentle, almost shy, yet they speak of a time when fish darted beneath their edges and reptiles surfaced for breath. The exploration of this place moves between silence and memory. Picture a dinosaur standing at the edge of a shallow bay, its reflection trembling in green water. The sky overhead vast and unbroken. The creature lowers its head to drink, unaware that millions of years later, grass will grow where it stands. Picture fish beneath reeds, their scales flashing silver in filtered sunlight. Coral gardens humming with quiet life. The inland sea alive with motion, yet boundless in calm. And now, picture only grass and horizon. No surf, no foam, only wind. The transformation from sea to plain was not violent. There was no single wave that marked the end. The water retreated inch by inch, breath by breath. Marsh became meadow. Seabed rose into sunlight. The earth reshaped itself with patience beyond comprehension. It is said that vast transformations occur without spectacle. The plains do not carry visible sorrow for the sea's departure. They carry foundation. The sediment left behind by tides now feeds roots. Crops draw nourishment from marine dust. Rivers carve paths along basins once shaped by saltwater currents. Even the sky seems to remember. The openness above mirrors the openness that once existed in water below. The plains and the sea share a vastness, a sense of horizon without boundary. As night settles, stars emerge above the Great Plains. They shine as they did when the inland sea shimmered beneath them. Their light once reflected in waves, now it glints faintly in dew gathered upon grass. Marked by the moon, the prairie glows silver. For a moment, if you allow yourself to soften into the silence, the grass becomes surf again, the wind becomes tide, the horizon becomes shoreline. Perhaps it was never meant to be erased, perhaps it was meant to transform. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen. The forgotten tides of the Great Plains do not shout. They move quietly beneath the surface, in fossil beds hidden beneath soil, in chalk cliffs rising pale against sky, in the gentle curve of land shaped by ancient currents. It is said that beneath every wide plain lies a drowned history, patient, unhurried, waiting not to be discovered, but to be felt. The plains appear endless, dry, windswept, but listen closely. In the hush between gusts, in the ripple of grass beneath moonlight, there is an oceanic rhythm, a faint suggestion of salt carried not in air, but in memory. And as you stand there beneath the vast sky, you may sense that nothing truly disappears. It changes form. It becomes dust. It becomes soil. It becomes wind across tall grass. The sea has withdrawn, but its tides remain, not in water, but in the quiet, sacred breathing of the plains. Night has already settled when you lie back upon the earth. The grass is cool beneath your shoulders. The wind has softened into a gentle murmur. Above you, the sky opens, vast, star-marked, immeasurable. Constellations drift slowly across the dark, their patterns familiar and yet impossibly ancient. It is said that these same stars once shone over a different world, long before wheat fields whispered in the wind, before fences stitched the horizon into careful lines, before rivers traced their quiet paths through prairie soil. There was water here, an inland sea stretching from south to north, shimmering beneath a younger sun. And above that sea, this same sky. You rest beneath it now, centuries upon centuries removed from waves that once folded themselves across this land. The ocean is gone. The creatures that swam within it are fossil and dust. Yet the stars remain. Some believe that the sky is the only true witness to time, that it watches without judgment as continents divide and reunite, as seas flood and recede, as life rises and falls in endless spirals. Close your eyes for a moment and journey backward. Imagine the western interior seaway beneath you, warm, luminous, oceanic. The water reflects the constellations like scattered jewels trembling in silver ripples. The moon hangs low, marked by the moon's pale authority, casting a path of light across the surface. Sea and sky touch in silent communion. Waves mirror starlight. The horizon dissolves into reflection. Above and below become indistinguishable. It is said that in such moments, the boundary between heaven and earth grows thin. Beneath that celestial canopy, mosasaurs glide through green depths. Ammonites drift in sacred spirals. Coral gardens breathe in quiet abundance. Dinosaurs stand at the water's edge, their reflections trembling beneath a vast and star-filled dome. None of them know that the sea will vanish. None of them know that millions of years later, grass will sway where waves once shimmered. But the sky knows. The constellations move in slow procession, as they do now. Orion rises, the Great Bear circles, the moon waxes and wanes in patient rhythm. The same celestial bodies that watched ancient tides now watch silent plains. The sea withdrew, the land rose, creatures disappeared, and yet above it all the sky remained. It is said that continuity does not always lie in what is visible. Sometimes it resides in what endures quietly, without alteration. The limestone cliffs formed from marine dust now glow pale beneath starlight. Fossils embedded in stone hold the imprint of vanished life. Rivers trace the faint scars of ancient shorelines. But the sky, vast, indifferent, luminous, continues its eternal arc. Whispers tell us that beneath every change lies something constant. You open your eyes again. The stars above seem close enough to touch. Their light has traveled across unimaginable distances, crossing space and time to reach you here, lying upon land that was once ocean floor. Some of that starlight reflected upon waves millions of years ago. It shimmered in green water, it danced upon the backs of marine reptiles, it glinted in the spirals of ammonite shells. Now it rests upon fields of wheat. The sacred contradiction is gentle. The world changes shape, but the quiet between tides endures. It is said that when you lie beneath the night sky, you are lying beneath the same ancient witness that has watched every epoch. The sea did not carry its own light. It borrowed it from the stars, and when the water vanished, the stars did not dim. They continued. Beneath the silence of the plains, beneath layers of sediment and fossil, beneath soil enriched by marine dust, the memory of ocean breath lingers. But above, the sky is unchanged. The moon that once lit shallow bays now lights gravel roads and quiet farmhouses. The same crescent that once traced silver paths across water now traces pale arcs across dry fields. Marked by the moon, the land glows softly. In forgotten corners of the earth, pale outcrops still hold the imprint of marine life. But you do not need to see fossils to sense continuity. All you need is the sky. Imagine once more the sea and sky touching in silver silence, the horizon blurred by reflection, the constellations mirrored in trembling ripples. Now imagine only grass and horizon. The water has gone. The ripples no longer exist, yet the stars shine just the same. It is said that time moves in spirals rather than lines, that what appears lost returns in another form. The sea became limestone. Limestone became cliff. Cliff became foundation for soil. Soil became field. And through it all, the sky arced overhead. Perhaps that is the deeper mystery, not the disappearance of oceans, nor the extinction of giants, but the endurance of quiet witness. The stars do not grieve. They do not celebrate. They remain. You feel the earth beneath you, solid, grounded, terrestrial, and yet you know that beneath that solidity lies an oceanic past. Beneath the silence of soil lies the hush of waves. Beneath your resting body lies a seabed turned plain. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen. Listen now, not with ears, but with stillness. The wind moves softly through grass, creating faint ripples that resemble distant surf. The rhythm is subtle, almost imagined. The air carries the cool breath of night. And above, the constellations drift. It is said that if you trace their patterns long enough, you begin to sense your place within a continuity far older than any single era. The sea was one chapter, the plains are another. The sky holds them both without preference. The ocean is gone, but its memory breathes through stone and dust. The world changes shape, water to land, coral to cliff, shell to chalk. Yet the quiet between tides endures. You lie beneath the same ancient sky that once watched green waves shimmer across this continent. The same stars that guided no sailors here still mark their silent courses. The same moon that once touched water now touches grass. Perhaps it was never meant to be about permanence. Perhaps it was meant to be about presence. The sea was present. Now the plains are present. The sky is constant. As sleep begins to gather at the edges of your awareness, you feel that continuity settle within you. The sea has vanished. The creatures have disappeared. But the sky remains vast and veiled, carrying forward its silent witness. Under the same ancient sky, you rest, and beneath you, though unseen, The memory of water lingers in stone. The stars drift, the grass whispers, the quiet endures.